All right. How's everybody today?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Everybody had a good weekend? Jacob, if you would turn off that light for me, please, sir. Okay. Well, a couple things before we go ahead and get started. We are just days away from finishing up our entire stats unit. We finally talked about all the statistical strategies that IB would like us to do, and hopefully by Wednesday, we should be able to move on into our next unit, logic sets and probability. We'll talk about if-then statements and all that good stuff, but that's coming up in a couple of days. Remember, Friday is the end of the 6 weeks, so any remaining item that can still be retaken, like the exam from last Thursday, you have until this Thursday morning by 8:05 a.m. So if you have any questions, come on in. I know there's still several people who need me to pass back their tests, so I will go ahead and do that at the end today. Uh, let's go ahead and start talking about the outline. So this is the document that I've been talking about since the beginning of the school year. This is going to be due on Monday the 30th. So you got 1 week. So by this time, you should have a pretty good idea of what your internal assessment topic is going to be. If you still don't have one, try to think of one as quickly as you can, or if you have trouble, or if you're even not sure if your topic is going to be good, come talk to me. We can bounce some ideas off each other. But the one thing I want to go ahead and throw out at the very beginning, spoiler alert, I am not an English teacher. Okay, I'm a math teacher, so naturally I'm going to grade some essays, your internal assessments. So all I can do is try to give you some advice, some material I found talking to some of the other English teachers, ways to help you out. But I would like to go ahead and get you thinking about an outline. We're not talking about actually writing the paper just yet. We're talking about just the structure of your paper. What kind of information are you thinking about putting into it? Hopefully by this point you've already started collecting data. Maybe not if you're doing your own experiment, but definitely if you're going to be using an online source. Hopefully you've already got that. But I just want to go ahead and point a few things out to you here. Okay, now in order to get 100% on this, you do need to go ahead and turn in some kind of data. Now I'm not talking about just providing me a URL or something saying, okay, the data is going to be found at this particular site. I mean, actually show me the raw data. I'm not so much going to be interested in the mathematical strategies that this is talking about, but I would like to see the data that you have, because that's going to be the driving force behind your paper. Okay, you're going to be analyzing it using whatever methods you deem necessary, and then you'll be making your inferences based on that. Okay, so also think about, with your data, okay, what type of visual aids are going to best display it? Could you put it in a scatter plot? Could it be a bar graph? Okay, what way could you visualize the data? And then I broke down basically your paper into these three parts. We have the introduction, we got the body of the paper, and then the conclusion. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be looking for, and I went ahead and color-coded this to make it a little easier. First, the introduction should have some of the following elements depending on the type of paper. And I won't read all of these, but maybe some kind of attention grabber, an overview, something to go ahead and get the reader interested in the concept or topic that you're going to be referring to. And then according to this outline, okay, you'll go ahead and put your thesis statement right at the end. So you'll notice right here you've got 3 lines. Whatever any of those points kind of step out to you, stand out to you. If you're going to tell like a short story, very short story, to go ahead and introduce your topic, whatever it is that you may do. And then you'll put your thesis statement right here. So I would like to kind of see what your working thesis statement is. Now, when I was back in your position in high school, I was always taught to go ahead and put the thesis statement at the very beginning as my topic sentence, and then kind of past that. Shows how old I am, because I already see some people shaking their heads no. But again, I get that just kind of confirms that this information here is more accurate than what I know. All right, so that's your introduction. Okay, then you want to go ahead and move on to the body. And again, clearly present the main points of the paper as listed in the thesis. Kind of think about how you're going to break your paper up. So after you get through your introduction, well, what would be the next logical step? Okay, after you've already introduced your topic, you would probably go ahead and show the reader what? Any ideas? Bounce some ideas off. I would probably be thinking about showing your data. Okay, because you've already instructed the person on, okay, this is the topic I'm going to discuss. This is what I'm going to discuss through the paper. Here's the data I've collected. Maybe a short little explanation if you did collect the data yourself, or if you did go ahead and collect it from an online source. Remember, always cite those sources. But basically, that's what this portion of the outline is. Okay, just kind of be thinking about how you're going to structure it, how you're going to make your paper flow. All right, so maybe the first one right there for the body, you're going to go ahead and show the data. Like if you're collecting your own data, you do want to go ahead and provide a copy of the survey to let the reader know how it was that you did that. Maybe one part is going to be a particular strategy. So this second main point right here could be the first strategy. Like, is there anybody out there who's already thinking chi-squared is going to be very useful to me? Okay, maybe that. Maybe if you want to go ahead and start with measures of central tendency. And I'm just kind of throwing ideas out there, maybe how I would go ahead and structure it. Remember, this is your paper. You can do it however you'd like. I'm just kind of here to guide you. But that's what the body is. Kind of talk to me about what you're going to be doing in the main portion of your paper. Is everybody okay with that? Good. Hey. When it asks for the audience at the top. Well, for me, really for you, the audience is going to be me. Okay, what's right here? Sorry. I just don't have that on here, but yeah, I'm your audience. Okay. But, I mean, if you do, I don't know, I've never had that come up on an internal assessment. If you would actually be looking for a particular age range, I guess you could go ahead and incorporate that into your paper, unless you were going to go ahead and present it also to people in that particular range or type of person that you were wanting to read your paper. But basically, yeah, your audience is just going to be me. And also whoever it is from IB who looks over my shoulder and grades what I did. Okay, because that's how IB works. All right. And then, of course, your conclusion, reworded thesis, usually found near the beginning of the conclusion. Okay, basically restating your topic sentence. And the conclusion is just that, kind of tying up all the loose ends, kind of restating a lot of the conclusions that you came to, your interpretations, why you did the thing you did. Remember, at some point, has anybody had the opportunity to really look over the rubric, those 7 criteria? Okay. If you haven't already, when you're thinking about your paper, that's a really good idea to always kind of have that in the back of your mind, because one particular criteria that people tend to miss is validity. Okay, I would even go ahead and do that probably in the main part of your body before you get to the conclusion. And the paper, the criteria actually talks about this in more detail, but essentially that's when you want to go ahead and start to question any limitations that maybe your data had. Could there have been any potential bias in the way the data was collected? Should you have done any additional strategies that could have resulted in a different outcome? Or were there any problems that you believe occurred with the strategies you used? Basically, kind of taking everything you've done into question, that's essentially what that validity is going to be. And it's only one point. So really, there's only 2 options. You either get credit for the validity or you don't. Okay, so there's that. And then just finish it off, other ideas to conclude if you want to go ahead and start to fill that in. But that's really all I'm looking for at this point. Okay, I'm not looking for the actual essay. That's not coming up until when? December 12th. So we're still a few months out, but I do want you to be thinking about, the body of your paper. I've said many times that this thing is progressive. It's not going to be finished in, a weekend or a week. It's something that's going to take time. But I want you to continue to be thinking about it, and as you have ideas, maybe write them down. Okay? Maybe if you have a few minutes, write down a possible paragraph, anything like that, as we're moving towards that December deadline. But remember, this is due when? This is going to be due Monday, so you have a full week. Okay? And if you're going to get the 100%, it is going to be taken for a grade, you do need to provide what? You need to provide some type of data. Okay? All right. Questions on that? All right. Cool. All right, so there is the outline. Perfect. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up chi-squared today, because here's my plan for this week. I want to go ahead and wrap up chi-squared today. I want to do an additional example to make sure you feel comfortable with it. We are going to go ahead, probably have a quiz next week. Near the end of this week, I'm going to go ahead and give you an exit ticket where you'll have the opportunity to work on it together, with your notes. But that's going to carry over into the next 6 weeks. So we'll finish this up today. Tomorrow, I want to talk about any issues you might have with the chi-squared test for independence, some limitations. And then hopefully everything will fall nicely. On Wednesday, we can go ahead, be done with statistics. We can move on into our next unit, logic, sets, and probability. Okay, moving into the second 6 weeks. That's my goal. All right. So any questions about anything that's going to be coming up this week, next week, start of the second 6 weeks, any of that? Retakes? Everybody have a good weekend? Yay. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get to it. So there's a lot of information that we talked about when it came to chi-squared. In fact, it took us a little over a week, some of it because of the test last week, but also there was a lot of information to discuss. So I'm not going to go ahead and go through it all right now. Let's actually look at a problem. Okay, if this will pop up. Okay. So I've got some observed data for you right here. Okay, it looks like I'm comparing gender, okay, to the choice of a particular sport. Okay, and yes, I'm just going to go ahead and say table tennis is a sport, okay, just for purposes of this problem. All right. So there's a couple things I want to go ahead and do. You'll notice I've got down here H naught and H sub 1. Does anybody remember what we referred to those as, what we talked about last week? Okay, H naught is my null hypothesis. H sub 1 is my alternative hypothesis. Okay, so what does that mean? The null hypothesis is independent. Okay, so what's the alternative hypothesis? That means they are not independent. That means there's some kind of relationship between these quantities that we have here. So as I've said before, these two sentences are going to be virtually identical. The null hypothesis is going to be stating that they are independent. There's no relationship between the two. And the second one will be stating that they are not independent. There has to be some kind of relationship between the two. So we're talking about gender and choice of sports. Those are my two categories here. And of course, they're broken down into some subcategories. But can anybody give me what they believe would be a good sentence for my null hypothesis? How should I write this out if I were asked to do so? Okay, Ella? Well, now correlation is a different idea. Okay, that's for scatter plots. And here we're talking about based on comparing different sets of data, how strong the relationship is based on that numerical value. However tightly packed or spread apart they are. Okay. So Ethan's absolutely right. I mean, he says that the two quantities are what in the null hypothesis? They're independent. Okay, so we know we got to say they're independent, but what are we saying are independent? Gender. Okay, so Jacob says gender is independent from preferred sports choice. How's that? Okay, do you think that'd be a good sentence? Okay. Is there any other way we could say that? Or is there only just the one way we could ever write that sentence? Yeah, there's definitely going to be more than one way. John Henry, how would you say it? Huh. Okay. So I like the way these two different folks are saying it. Jacob is a little more broad. He's mentioning the categories themselves. John Henry goes ahead and mentions every sport listed and male, female. Okay, is there anything wrong with that? No. I mean, if that's how you want to go ahead and write your complete sentence. Anybody else want to chime in? Anybody else thinking my sentence is good? What's that, John Henry? There you go. Okay. So nobody else? Okay. All right. I like to go ahead and say something, just straight to the point, a lot of what Jacob was saying. I would probably go ahead and say something to the effect of gender and choice of sport is independent. Okay. Straight to the point. So what would you like me to write? I got Jacob's, I got John Henry's, I offered you one. Anybody else want to go ahead and throw theirs in the ring? You think I should write a null hypothesis? That's what we're doing.
we should use.
So you're choosing mine over yours? Why? Well, yours was short too. Okay. All right. So I'll just go ahead and write that out. So let's see, gender. Okay. And unfortunately, I don't have a copy of this for everybody. If you just want to go ahead and follow along, or if you want to copy it down on a piece of paper, before I go ahead and write out the sentence, I'll go ahead and kind of throw this out there. Last week on Thursday, something was brought to my attention that I was not aware of, and it's going to be affecting really the other classes more so than you. Sometimes it will affect you, but have you noticed in the hallway those brand new copy machines we got in the spring semester? And if you've ever been down to the lounge or in certain areas of the building, we've got these brand new Canon buildings, or Canon copiers. Well, we are not actually purchasing those, we're leasing them. So part of the contract, we were unaware the company put a cap on the number of copies per year that a teacher could make. Okay, now Jacob's already laughing because he knows where I'm going with this. At the end of last week, which was only the 5th week of school, okay, let me show you how many copies I had left. Now, they decided that every teacher in the building would have 40,000 copies for the entire school year. Okay, I'm guessing that they just did the total number and divided it evenly among the teachers, so I'm guessing some will go over, like me, and some will not go over, okay? But as of Thursday of last week, I had only 26,500 copies remaining for the year. And remember, I started the year with how many? 40,000. So I got to say, that's kind of impressive, isn't it? 5 weeks to go ahead and get it down over 13,000 copies. I was actually kind of blown away by that number. So I am not exactly sure what's going to happen if I reach 0. I think it's going to be okay. We'll see. But it was suggested that, by an administrator and by my department head that I look for ways to not make a ton of copies every week. So this is one of them. That's why you don't have copies of this right now. Okay, just in case anybody was wondering. But it'll work out because I'm definitely going to keep providing copies of the notes and, if we ever do an in-class assignment, something like that. But occasionally something like this might pop up. Okay. Like I said, it's going to affect pre-calculus more so than you guys. All right, so anyways, back to the problem. So gender and, I can say, what did I say, sports preference? Sports. Okay. And you can tell I'm a math teacher. Is that the correct way to spell preference? It is not? Then how do I spell it correctly? Is it E-N-C-E? Oh, okay, so it's preference. Is that right? Oh, so I just had the A wrong.
There's no A in it's
Okay. See, I'm not the only one. There we go. I deal with numbers. That's why I went ahead and laid that disclaimer at the beginning. I will do my best to grade these essays. I'm going to focus more on the mathematical portion, and that's all I can do. Follow the rubric, okay? So gender and sports preference, okay, are what? Independent. The null hypothesis will always state that they're independent, that there's no relationship between the two, or as they say, no association. Now, instead of rewriting the whole thing out for the alternative, I'm just going to go ahead, gender and sports preference are not independent. Okay, so you don't have to make these, crazy long sentences that are extremely specific. You just want to go ahead and get your point across. Whatever quantities you're comparing, they're either independent or they are not independent. Okay, so let's go ahead and start getting some folks up here because, I've talked a lot about chi-squared, but I want your help with this. I want you guys to be able to do it. All right, so we have my contingency table, the two-way table, but I need to go ahead and get my totals. Who knows what I'm referring to? Okay. John Henry, you know what I'm referring to? Because I have the data, but I don't have a row and a column showing me my totals. In fact, I don't know how many people belong to this particular survey. So, John Henry, would you like to come on up and find those for me?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I'll go ahead and put a little box here like that. All right.
40 men, 20 men volleyball, 10 in table tennis. This could be 17.
Okay.
And then if I have 20, 15, 15.
So how many men and women belong to the survey?
No, that's
That's okay.
number.
That's okay.
That is an incorrect number. Quick math.
So 120.
Yeah, and so if you got that is 60.
Okay.
And then that is 35, and then that is 25.
Okay. And will 60 plus 35 plus 25 also give me 120?
I mean, it's me doing the math, so y'all need to check.
You're good. You're
And
good.
then-
Actually, that's all I need. So if you want to continue, you can.
I'm good.
Okay, John Henry is already sitting down. Okay, now remember, that's the observed data. Okay, that's the data that was actually collected. Well, one thing a lot of times you're going to be asked to do is find an expected value. Okay, that's what the next table is. How do I find an expected value for any of those cells? What does that mean? Hey, Ethan. Okay, multiply what? Okay, so let's say that I want to go ahead and find the expected number of men who chose badminton. Okay, so I'm going to take the total of that particular column. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the total of that particular row. So those are the items he says we're going to multiply. So 60 times 70, and then I want to divide by what? 120. Okay, so if we were to go ahead and do that, what should we be getting for the first one here? 60 times 70 divided by 120. I got 35. Okay. Is everybody okay with that? And then if I wanted to go ahead and find the expected number of men who chose volleyball, I would multiply that column total, 35, times the row total, 70, divided by 120, in which case I'm getting 20.4167. Okay. Now we're just talking about it. Does anybody want me to plug this in the calculator? Does anybody want me to go ahead and show that we're getting those values? Okay. Now remember, when you go ahead and type this information in the calculator, it will display the expected frequency values if you type in the correct keystrokes. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But if everybody's okay, then I'll just go ahead and fill in the rest of these. For this one, I got 14.5833. Okay, then for the females, first one, 25, who chose badminton, 14.5833. And then for this last one right here, I got 10.4167. Those are my expected frequency values. And what does that actually mean? Expected frequency values. There you go. If these two quantities, gender and choice of sport, were independent, if they had absolutely no relationship, these are the number of people I would expect to have chosen those sports. That's what it means. Okay. Now you'll notice I have this table down here where I had the original idea that we were going to go ahead and fill the entire thing in. This right here, taking the sum, was going to result in my chi-squared calculated value. Okay. But unless anybody just really, really wants to, I'm thinking let's just do it on the technology. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do that. Now you guys are going to walk me through this one. Okay. Now you'll notice on your homework, which is due tomorrow, you do have two problems where I would like you to go through it by hand, but then the other two, you're going to go ahead and just do that on the calculator. All right. So let me go ahead and pull up my calculator. All right. I'll learn more later. Okay. So this is different than what we've seen previously. Stephanie, let's say I want to go ahead and determine the chi-squared value for gender and sports preference based on the data we have. What's the first thing I do? Not list in spreadsheets. We don't need a spreadsheet on this one. I'm sorry? Okay, so we're just going to go to our normal scratch pad. Okay, so calculate. So where do I go from here? No, not yet. Click the weird thing beside the book. Okay, so this button right here between 9 and the catalog, okay, because you have to put your information in using a Matrix. Okay. All right. So in fact, this matrix is a 2 by 3. Remember, don't worry about the row or the column totals. We only look at the data itself. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 2, leave that as a 3, click OK. It gives me the template. So I'm going to type in my information, 40. Then we had 20 and 10. And then we had 20, 15, and 15. Okay, so I've got the information in. Now I need to store this under a variable. How do I do that? Ellen. Control, and then the variable button right here. See, the blue is the store. Okay, we can call it whatever you want. I'll just call it X. Yes, ma'am. Have you clear Scratchpad? Just push Document B. Document B will always clear your Scratchpad and your graphing screen. Unfortunately, it won't take care of your documents. For that one, you'll need Control W. Okay, so now, who was it who said menu a second ago? Was it John Henry? Okay. So after we've got the matrix in, I'm going to click menu. Okay, let's see. Laura, where do I go from here? Statistics? Jaylee? So after I choose statistics, what do I want to use? Okay. Elizabeth, can you help her out? Oh, okay. Erica? There you go. So you choose menu, statistics. We want stat tests. Okay. And then Sarah Beth, what do I choose now? We want the two-way test. Remember our table, we call them a contingency or a two-way table. So as soon as I click enter, it's going to say, okay, what matrix? We're going to click it in as X. Okay. And it's going to give me the information. Okay. So my chi-squared calculated value, let's say 5.19. Okay. 5.19. What does DF mean? Remember, that's degrees of freedom. Okay. So does anybody want to talk about that? How do we calculate the degrees of freedom? Okay. So the number of rows minus 1 times the number of columns minus 1. Okay. And if I want to go ahead, and while I have this up here, if I do want to go ahead and show the expected frequency values, which we found by hand a moment ago, remember, go to variables above 9. You don't have to hit control this time. And choose the one EXP matrix. Okay, expected matrix. There you go. And there are the values that I previously put up there. So those are multiplying the column and the row totals divided by the total of all the people in here. Okay, so what was my chi-squared calculated value again? 5.19. So I'm going to come back over here to my paper. Okay. Now, this is what I provided last week. Okay. Let me go ahead and use my marker. I'm just going to write on this for room. So my chi-squared calculated, the one that we would have found using this spreadsheet here, we got 5.19. Now, let's say that I want to go ahead and test this at 5%. Okay. Let's say I want to test it at 5%. I want to compare this to my critical value. But does anybody remember, how do I find my critical value? Remember this chart here in the notes that I provided. Okay. I said let's test it at 5%. Okay. But that's a lot of numbers in the 5% column. How do I go ahead and decide which one to use? What was my degrees of freedom? It was 2. Okay. So it looks like my critical value this time is going to be 5.99. Okay. So let's come back over here. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to compare that to 5.99. So 5.19 is less than 5.99. What is this test telling me about gender and choice of sport? The calculated is less than the critical. So remember, we don't say we accept or we do not accept, because at a different significance level, your answer could change. So we say we reject the null hypothesis or we do not reject the null hypothesis. In this case here, we would not reject the null hypothesis. Okay, that tells me they're independent. If your calculated value is less than the critical value, according to this, there is no relationship between if you're male or female and the choice of sport you're going to have. Okay. Now, if it's greater than your calculator, it should be greater than your critical, then we reject the null hypothesis, which says they're independent. So that means they're associated in some way. There has to be a relationship. But remember, when you're talking about chi-squared, it's a pretty easy test to perform. The only thing is it doesn't tell you what the nature of that relationship is. You would have to decide that by yourself. Is everybody okay? Now let's see, could we still have figured this out had we not looked up the critical value? What was one of the last items we talked about in the lesson last week? The p-value. Now this is something you are never going to go ahead and calculate yourself. It's always in the calculator when you go ahead and do this. So it looks like my p-value, let's say 0.07. Okay, 0.07. So my p-value is 0.07. Okay. Now I also put this over here on the top right. What do you think SL stands for? The significance level. Now remember, I went ahead and chose to test this at 5%, right? So I'm going to compare 0.07 to 0.05. We want the decimal version of your significance level. Well, 0.07 is greater than 0.05. Okay, so according to what we have here, it says do not reject the null hypothesis. So does that kind of confirm what we had before? Yes. Kind of think about that as an extra step. In fact, is it possible, let's say, for example, that this first one said, okay, your calculated compared to your critical says don't reject the null hypothesis, they're independent. But then your p-value, could it absolutely change its mind and say, no, they're not independent? Yes, it very well could do that. It's very possible. Okay. How are we doing? Hey, Jacob. Now, on this one, it confirms. Because, see, my calculated was less than the critical, so I know they're independent, okay? But my p-value was greater than the significance level, which is still telling me do not reject the null hypothesis. Okay.
Verification that the p-value doesn't reflect the first relationship.
Yeah, I would go with the p-value over the original, yes. It's kind of like the p-value would have the final say. Okay. All right. And like I said, normally you probably won't ever be doing anything with the p-value. Last year on paper exam, I think it was one, or I can't remember which one it was, but they did not provide the critical value, but they still expected the student to say, yes, they're independent, or no, they're not independent. And it came down to that. So it's something that you're probably, it's not going to be at the top of your list, but definitely something that we want to remember. Okay, it's another check. All right, there we go. That is chi-squared.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, questions. How we doing? Okay. So as a final statement to this, I would probably say a couple of sentences somewhere along the lines. We do not reject the null hypothesis. Okay, I would state that gender and choice of sport are independent. Or you could say they are not associated. Remember, the one thing we don't want to say is that we accept or we do not accept the null hypothesis. Okay. All right. So we still have not as much time as I was hoping. I've got about 13, maybe 12 minutes left, if that. But is there anybody who has not finished the chi-squared assignment? So everybody's finished it? Oh, so there's a few people who haven't. Okay. So I was wanting to give you just a little bit of time today with the calculator if you needed it to go ahead and finish that up. So we'll turn that in tomorrow. It still counts. Oh, people were telling me on Friday that I did not mention the point bank.
Yes.
Okay, so let me go ahead and quickly mention that. What I'm going to go ahead and do, you know how I'm keeping track in teams of people who were turning in homework and not turning them in? I put in a category for that assignment weighted at 0%, so it in no way affects your average. Well, what I'm doing, I came up with an idea for the pre-cal classes, and it seems to be working so far, but I'm going to go ahead and put in another category called a point bank. Okay, now I'm kind of doing it at the end of the 6 weeks, so really it's only going to apply to this one lesson that you're going to turn in tomorrow. But the idea is I'm going to put him at 0%, so he will in no way affect your average. Okay, but every time you turn an assignment in on time, I'm going to go ahead and put points in that bank, maybe 3 or 4. Okay, and they're going to accumulate for every assignment we have in the 6 weeks. So think about the assignments we have here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this one right here would have been the 7th assignment of the 6 weeks, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and take them, let's say 4 points each, that's 28 points that you would have in your bank. At the end of the 6 weeks, I would then take those points and go ahead and first apply them to your tests. I could just put those points directly on whatever you made for the tests, and if those max out, the maximum I can go is 110. Okay, but once I reach 110 on those, if that happens, well, then I could just put the remainder of the points on the rest of the grades, whatever it needs. Okay, but you can only get the points if you turn them in on time. If you turn them in late, give you a high five, but you can't get the points. Okay, so does that sound like a good idea to kind of encourage that? I mean, just think, 28 points on one test, I mean, that can make a huge difference. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be doing. Now, it'll start better in the second 6 weeks because I just had the idea last week to do this. But okay. Yeah, so at most you'll have like 4 points. But, better late than never. You remember at the beginning of the year I said I didn't have anything to kind of incentivize or motivate people, to get the homework turned in other than the fact that it's math and it's super fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, Ella knows. Okay, but now hopefully that'll encourage some more people, try to get that done. Okay, good.